Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to Moveset Breakdown. So this is going to be the breakdown continuing for Vermintide, and thank you all so much for the support you guys have been showing. One of you even linked my Marcus Kruber video on Reddit for the Vermintide Reddit, and we got some support there, so thank you very much for sharing that further. Really glad that you liked it. But I've moved outside, as you guys can see. Hopefully this will cut down on some of the ambient noise, as this is kind of the only time I have to film today. But what we're going to do with this is that when it comes to some of the weapons in Vermintide, they aren't quite in-depth enough, per se, for me to do a full video. And I would rather do these grab bag videos where I kind of just go over it relatively briefly, but still talk about stuff, which would be a little bit longer, as opposed to doing a bunch of mini videos, as I don't want to, as much as I'd love to, milk this YouTube algorithm, as long as you guys are interested in it, I don't want to make a bunch of really little videos. So hopefully you'll get a bit more out of this. Let me know what you think. But either way, we're going to be going over just the simple one-handed moveset. Okay? So what I mean by this is the default one-handed weapon for every class. So in this regard, for Marcus, it's the longsword. For Victor, I decided to go with the falchion, since we already covered the rapier. And then for the others, it's going to be just a one-handed sword. Sienna also used the longsword, and then Bardin is going to use an axe. So, either way, starting off, first off, in regards to Kruber's moveset, is that he is using a longsword, and this can cause a bit of confusion, especially after seeing the Bretonnian moveset, right? It's like, okay, that's a longsword that he's only using in two hands, but this one he uses in one hand? What's the difference? And the answer is that longswords come in various lengths. This is what modern terms is usually referred to as a hand and a half, which is not a historical term, but it does suit the purpose very well, so I'm not going to hawk on anybody for using it. Basically what it means is it's a sword that is long enough, a little bit longer than your normal one-hander, and it's got enough grip that I can comfortably put two hands on here. Now, in regards to what is the purpose of this sword, it's usually very good as day carry, as it's just long enough for me to use. One hand decently comfortable, but I can put two hands on if I need to. My sharp is actually what you would probably classify as a hand and a half, even though it is a longsword. But in regards to why Marcus uses one, it fits pretty well. It seems to be pretty standard Empire, just day carry, as Sienna also seems to use one. But the question you might have would be, okay, so if it's big enough to be used in two hands, but it's also light enough to be used in one hand, why doesn't everyone just use one? The answer is because it's kind of jack of all trades, master of none. It's just a little bit slow for a one-hander, and it's just a little bit short for a two-hander. So, be that as it may. But, in regards to Marcus's moveset, we're going to start off with his stance. So he's going to be right foot forward, and he's going to go ahead and hold pretty much a low fluke. His other hand is just kind of hovering here. I'm going to put it on my hip, just because that's what I was trained to do. Now, in regards to what I mean by low flug, flug is the plow guard. Usually your tip is directed up, like the blade of a plow, but we're going to be having it a bit more horizontal, as per what Marcus does. And from here, he's going to use just small little lunges with his footwork. Nothing too complicated, really. Now, his basic cutting pattern is going to be quite simple. It's going to be down from right, back from the left on a horizontal line, and then he's going to go straight down. So, that'll be 1, 2, 3, we're back to guard. Nothing too complicated, really. Pretty standard for what I would expect from him. And the only really thing from there would be his two-handed moveset, which is going to be when he does a heavy attack, he will put both hands on the blade, and it's just going to be horizontal sweeps, which I'm just using passing step footwork with, as normally you're moving side to side when you launch these. So, altogether, that would be light set, 1, 2, 3, heavy, heavy, back into guard. And then for his block, we're going to be moving up into what is called a hanging point. So, Hangenort, or hanging point, is where, rather than the blade being presented at my opponent, I just kind of let it dip. What's nice about this is it's very simple to hold, and it covers quite a lot of my body, as I can move this pretty much to catch any cut coming in at where I would expect most people's cuts to come from. So it's a very good guard for me to just use. So, just simple, pop up there, you're pretty much golden. And that's pretty much Kruber's moveset for the longsword in regards to his one-handed variant, his Imperial variant, let's call it that. Now, next on the list is going to be Saltspire, Victor. Now for this, like I said, he uses a falchion. I don't have a falchion. Go fund me, I guess. Instead, I'm going to use a messer, which is very similar. Now, a lot of people have the misconception, and I don't know where it started from, that falchions are like a mix between a sword and an axe. It's really not how they are. Falchions are instead, they're just like messers. They're actually very similar to a machete. They're quite thin, very, very good at cutting, and not quite, hard hacking type things. So I'm very glad to see that his moveset reflects that. But either way, for Victor's guard, we're going to be holding the point a little bit more upright. So whereas Kruber was down here, we're going to be much more up here, which is just perfect for Victor. Looks perfect for him, and actually feels very similar to a normal fighting guard that I would take. Now his cutting from here is going to be, again, pretty much what you expect. Standard Witchfinder, right? He's going to be going down from right, down from left, straight down the middle, back to guard. So overall, nothing out of the ordinary. Just, like I said, down from right, down from left, straight down the middle, we're back into guard. When it comes to him using his heavies, he is also going to two-hand the weapon, which, as you can see, even with my messer that has a surer handle, I got plenty of room to put my other hand on the blade without much difficulty. For that, he's going to rear up, and it's going to be 45 degree, 45 degree, back into guard. Now, I like this about Victor because he's always been one that's been a fan of very precise angles, and these are much more sort of linear, one-on-one type fighting cuts versus Kruber's tend to cover a wider array, so I think it works pretty well. I just wish he'd keep those elbows up. But either way, here's that one more time. So it's going to be, like I said, down from right, down from left, straight down the middle, two-hand, boom, boom, back to guard. And then for his block, once again, it's just going to be the hanging point. Pretty simple. Simple and effective. What I'd expect out of a witch hunter. Now we come to a new character. We come to Kerillian. And when we get to her later weapons, I'm going to have a lot to talk about because she has some pretty interesting movement. But in regards to her one-hander, she is using something that is... Technically what she's using is actually very similar to a... come on, brain. A Xiphos. A leaf-shaped sword of a one-handed variety. And I think that it fits her pretty well. I'm using just a simple arming sword, but they're comparative in length. But either way, her stance is going to be different. She's going to stand left foot forward, and then her guard is going to be kind of a low outside guard, and her lead hand is going to be kind of down here. Now, what's interesting about this is that pretty much all of the Empire folks, Victor, Kruber, and Sienna, they're all going to be standing right foot forward. Our non-humans, so of course Bardin and Kerillian, they're standing left foot forward. Now, your immediate thought might be, okay, sword nerd, what's impressive about that? It's that usually, when it comes to historical swordsmanship, if someone is standing right foot forward, that tends to indicate a later period. Not always, but mostly because once handguards become more evolved and the fencing culture changes because of it, more people are holding extended lead guards as opposed to, back before, more similar to your two-handed movesets. Obviously, bucklers, etc. are a little more common, but you usually keep your power side back, so that way I can use passing step type footwork. And if you're curious to hear more about this, by the way, Matt Easton has talked about here and there in a couple videos. You'll have to troll back a little bit, but there's the direct kind of conflict between British officers coming up against Afghans and Sikhs who stand left foot forward and use that older style of fighting versus the Brits standing right foot forward and using their more linear style of fighting. So if you want to know more about that, that is a deeper topic to jump into. But enough about that for now. I think it's a cool detail that the two non-humans stand left foot forward. I don't know if that was intentional, but if it is, it's a nice differentiation. But either way, for her guard, like I said, it's kind of a low outside guard. I don't really like this position a whole lot, as it's a bit wearing on the arm, and it doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, I think it'd be better for her to either hold it up, that doesn't really seem very in line with her, or better for her to hold it back in sort of a long tail type position, as with her two-handed moveset, we'll be seeing this guy quite a bit. So I think that would have been a little more in line, but either way, this doesn't necessarily hurt you. Now, her basic cutting pattern is going to be relatively straightforward. That's right. It's going to be a, from here, down from right, down from left, thrust, right? Now, in regards to her footwork, like I said, always kind of moving around, the footwork that I find very comfortable with this to do with her moveset would be to pass forward, pass back, and then pass forward again. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So from here, like I said, down from right, down from left, thrust. Now the thrust is of course the interesting part of this moveset, so let's talk about it a little bit. Now it is once again a nails down thrust, meaning that my hand is like this rather than my nails up, which would be to my inside. But it's a little bit more turn. So whereas Victor's was pretty much straight up secunda, nails down, we've got a bit more of a turn going on, so very similar to Prima, which would be straight up, straight down, more like a 45 to the outside, which is very similar to how you do some thrusts into Ox, or if you are a Bolognese person, this would be very similar to a thrust from Guardia di Testa, the guard of the head. But I think it's nice that she throws in a thrust, as it kind of supplements the fact that her cuts are relatively weak, I find, in comparison, but maybe I'm just too low of level. But either way, here's that moveset one more time. So, down from right, down from left, thrust, and then we're just back to guard. Now for her two-handers, we're actually going to get a longer combo than we're used to. So what she's going to do is she's going to pull up, put both hands, and we're going to go down, straight down the middle, turn the blade over, 1, 2. So it's going to be straight down, up from right, down from left. So here's that again. 1, 2, 3. And like I said, I'm just using it to kind of reset myself. And I think that's really cool that she gets a bit more complicated, as especially with her her other weapons, she has quite a bit of tricks to her. So I'm really looking forward to diving into that moveset. Either way, I think it's a great showcase of the diversity of her use of the sword. So kind of nice that she got a little bit extra, as it were. Now, next on the list is going to be Serana. And Serana, like all her Imperial friends, is going to be standing right foot forward. Her position is going to be very different, though. Rather than having the tip up, or even out, she's going to hold it kind of across her lead leg, which is kind of similar to Alber, right? Alber is if I hold the blade kind of extended before me. She's going to hold it, however, kind of across herself. Not necessarily a bad thing. Oh, I forgot, as well, Kerillian also blocks in the Hangar. Pretty much everyone does, except for Bardin. We'll get to him in a minute. But, like I said, tip is just kind of held over her lead leg, nothing out of the ordinary here. Now her cutting pattern, once again, going to be relatively simple. It's going to simply be down from right, across, straight down. So here's that again. Down from right, across, straight down, ready to guard. Now for her two-handers, that's again not pretty much exactly the same as Kruber. It's going to be two-hand, pass with middle, we're back to guard, and then her block is going to be a hanging point. Not a whole lot to talk about there, but then again, she spent most of her studies focused on, magic, so her swordsmanship being relatively simple, I think is a nice detail, because it actually kind of unites it with the fact that most of the Empire people seem to be doing the standard, as it were, and it gets them by. So I think it's nice to have that. Now, when we get to Bardin, that's where things get a little bit more exciting. Now, obviously, Bardin is using an axe instead of a sword, so bear with me. Let me go ahead and get into character for you. Oh! Alright. So Bardin is going to once again be standing left foot forward. Now what's interesting about this is, like I said, it lines him up with Kerillian. Now his guard is going to be a lower outside, so rather than being held kind of up like Kerillian does, he's going to be kind of holding it down and away from himself. And his cutting pattern is going to be relatively simple, as it's just going to be down from right, down from left, across from his right. Which, with an axe, seems pretty standard, so down, down, across, hit those ribs, we're back into guard. Now with his his two-handed heavy hits, pretty much straight down, so just very sheer 30 degree toward a head, so boom, boom, we're back to guard. Now what's interesting about Bardin's moveset is that he is going to move into the half sword, or half axe, I suppose, to block. Now there's a couple reasons for this, I think. I'm going to go ahead and stand up. As with a sword, if I move into the hanging point, more often than what happens is I get hit, right? Because my tip is down, I'll receive that blow. Even if I block it a bit more like here, I'll still receive the blow and it'll let my sword depress. Their sword will slip down toward my tip, and I then have an opportunity to return cut or leave or what have you. I can also set aside thrusts quite easily from here. Bardin, on the other hand, by going into the half sword, what he's doing is he's kind of reinforcing his block. Plus, unlike where we can have that slip down, if I reverse this like an axe real quick, you'll notice that if I block, it's going to most likely hit that part, right? As he is kind of reinforcing right on the face of the axe as opposed to, you know, below the handle. So when a blade slides down, it's going to hook into that little bit of the axe and it won't go anywhere. So him putting in, kind of half sorting it makes a lot of sense, as he'll catch it, it'll slide down hook, he can then expel it and fight however he will fight. So I think that's a nice detail that he does that. Overall though, that's pretty much the one-handed moveset. Now, there's a couple more things I want to talk about. Is, like I said, it seems to be kind of a unifying factor of the Empire. Maybe we're kind of getting like the basics of the Empire fighting standard, which is interesting. But one more thing I wanted to discuss that someone brought up that I didn't talk about in my earlier videos is the idea of push blocks. So in game, when you hold onto a block, right, you have your shields, and then as you receive attacks, the shields will weaken, and depending upon what weapon you're using, you have more or less. You can use one of those shields to push your opponents away and create some space, either to get out of a bad situation or to set up an attack. Does that exist in real life? The answer is kind of yes and no. It's similar to an expulsion. An expulsion, however, is done with the blade of my weapon. What I normally do is either if I'm trying to go in or leave, I take my blade and I'm going to flick kind of down the other person's blade, and what that causes, it's very sheer, and it will knock their sword out of the way, slide it, and I can either go in, or if I'm leaving, slide it and control it down to prevent them from following me very easily. This kind of uses the same concept, but it's done from much closer. Now, just body checking someone with the middle of your sword, yeah, it does kind of exist. You'll see it more often with spears or axes, as, especially in armor, when you get close to somebody, you can use the space between your hands, the demi-ash, to control someone's arm by getting it up underneath their armpit. If you can get onto their back, you can shove their shoulders down, or even shove them out of the way or over. You can also, of course, bop somebody in the face with that. I've had that happen to me, and it's quite disconcerting. There's a lot of things you can do from it, and you can pretty much fight from there, but it's not quite the same. You can't really use it against multiple people, and while it can knock somebody over, it's not usually what you're going for. So in closest to the Vermintide context, not really. It doesn't really exist. As if I was this close and I wanted to push someone away from me, yeah, I can use my weapon or my arms, usually my offhand, to push them away to create an opening. But usually if I'm at the distance where I'd want to do that with my sword, with both hands on the sword, I might as well be trying to set up my point going into them, or a wrestling action, or something along those lines. So from a gameplay perspective, it makes absolute sense that it's in there, but does it have a close real-world counterpart? Not really. But either way, that's going to be the grab bag, as it were, for the one-handed moveset of Vermintide. So next week, I'll be trying to go over the one-handed plus, as it were, so offhand weapons with this. That's kind of a signature for each character. So for example, for Saltspire, I'll probably be doing the falchion and the axe. For Kruber, I'll probably be doing sword and shield. For Bardin, I'll probably be doing axe and shield, etc. Right? So I will be going over their base, what we just went over, and kind of expanding on it as to how it kind of moves more into their signature, as it were. But either way, thank you guys so much for the support you've been showing these videos. Somebody even put it up on the Vermintide 2 Reddit. Thanks a lot for that. Really like people spreading the word. Really appreciate it. Hopefully filming outside took care of some of the sound. We'll have to see. But either way, more coming soon. And thank you guys very much. We will go over some other techniques another time.